welcome to the special show on ET Now. As we await Budget 21-22, which the Finance Minister has promised will be a budget like never before, we at ET Now are delighted to bring our viewers an interaction with Dr. Arvind Panagaria, noted trade economist, former Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, winner of the Padma Bhushan Award 2012, author of a number of books, presently Professor of Economics at Columbia University, and on a personal note, an old friend. Arvind brings to the table a rare blend of domestic and international experience in both academia and the policy space. So we are particularly delighted to have him with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mathili. Good to see you.
So let me start the discussion by asking you the obvious question against which any budget must be framed. What is your assessment of the macroeconomic scenario, both globally and in India?
Well, globally, I think, we'd be good if we can get back to the pre-COVID level of world output and income. I think that I would put that as a good scenario, at least, for the current year. Meaning, so if we are talking 2021, then things look a little better. Because we certainly have the vaccines going around. Two leading countries on that front are United States and China, but we have made a beginning in India as well. Some of the other countries are behind. So I think 2021 should look better, and we should see a good recovery. I don't want to put any numbers yet. I think it's too early to do that. In India, I remain optimistic that we would return actually for the 21-22 year to the pre-COVID GDP, perhaps a bit higher than that, obviously. So, given the base of the 2021, obviously this will mean a very significant growth. But I think, comparing to pre-COVID, we would do, the GDP should be significantly higher than where we left in 1920.
So what does it change in the US presidency? We know Biden is going to take over tomorrow. What does it mean for the US and global recovery? Do you see the US turn less protectionist? Do you see an end to the US-China trade wars? And what does this mean for the prospects of global trade, Arvind?
So personally, I don't think this is going to change the economic scenario very much. In a way, the policies that the Biden administration is going to inherit are likely to continue. They'll probably be a bit more on the stimulus side, so fiscal will be more expansionary. They certainly have given those indications right now, and that should help the US economy a bit. Although, on the other hand, a lot of the studies also show that temporary stimuluses that you give generally don't translate into very large impact, simply because people spend only a very small fraction of that money. And on trade front, US-China, I don't think there's going to be a change. There has been a long-standing bilateral consensus on China in the United States, going back to President Bush and then President Obama, going by all the reports that the USTR sends to the Congress annually. So that will have to depend on how the standoff between China and the United States plays out. But I don't think any initiative will happen from the US side just because there is a different president. From the Indian perspective, again, I don't see much change, given the fact that China is a major issue for the United States, not geopolitically. India is simply too critical for the United States to make any shifts in policy.
So what about global trade? Do you think global trade will be as lackluster as in the last year?
It should do better, because ultimately, remember that the dent in the global trade was made by COVID. And as we vaccinate the populations across the world, global trade will pick up also. It has already picked up, actually, by the way, the numbers as they show, the pickup in global trade has been way stronger and sooner than was the case in the 2008-9 global financial crisis. So again, and from India's perspective, really, I've always maintained that, what happens to the recovery of global trade is of far less importance than what we do in India because ultimately that global market is extremely large. Its total goods and services were about 25 trillion pre-COVID. Even if they drop to 23 or 22 trillion, that's a hell of a large market. Our problem is to get a larger share in that very large market.
Arvind, you spoke about the Indian economy doing better than was expected. And you also spoke about the US stimulus likely to be larger under the Democratic administration. So should we in India be a little less stingy as far as the fiscal stimulus is concerned? Should the government going into the budget worry about the fiscal deficit so much? Because so far, if you see, the RBI has been carrying the bulk of the load. So how should government really approach the budget? More specifically, how should it prioritize its spending? And should it really obsess about the fiscal deficit? A number of questions, but I know you'll be able to take them all together.
But Maithili, I think what the government did was absolutely right. So I won't characterize it at all as stingy. They were very prudent, actually, not to have started firing right away, as the United States did. And from the way the economic recovery has unfolded since then, that stance is actually vindicated. Now, because my own view has always been that, look, if the workers can't get to work, then you cannot generate supply response by simply stimulating demand. In fact, even the consumers can't go and spend the money because of COVID. I'm talking, 6 months ago, when we were talking about this, following the United States with a very large stimulus and so forth. I don't think it would have worked. Yeah, I mean, first the transfers or any kind of any stimulus would not have translated into effective demand in the first place. But even if it did, there couldn't have been a supply response because workers simply couldn't get to their workplaces. But now that is happening, now that workers are returning, now that we are vaccinating, there is certainly now scope for some response. What I would suggest is first off, a lot of overdue payments by the government to the states in terms of the GST overdues, the tax reimbursements or refunds to the people and companies and so forth. Likewise, a lot of the payments to be made on goods and services that have been delivered to the government, but payments have not been made. Fast track those, very quickly. So that's one thing I would do. I'd also front load a lot of the expenditures that you are going to do in 21-22. For instance, the PM Kisan payments could be made in advance rather than do in 3 tranches. Just do a 1 tranche of 6,000 rupees on April 1, if that is feasible. And then, some of the other expenditures that the government plans could also be front loaded. I think that's where I would start, and then see how the response comes through.
Under the UPA government, just before the 2008-9 crisis, just after rather, the fiscal deficit had gone up to as much as 6.4%. So do you think that something like a 6 to 7% is something that the government could safely run with? And there is this argument that the government should come clean, and rather than putting, in the government expenditure, in the FCI books, on the books of some other PSU, let's declare what the fiscal deficit actually is. So is a 6 or 7% perfectly okay? Will rating agencies not blink at that?
Well, I mean, I still remain on the conservative side, which is why I have said that, front load the expenditures and then wait and see where you want to go. And you can do a revision, if necessary, on the budget halfway through or something. So that's how I would go. Fiscal deficit does matter because you're also crowding out the private investment, which needs to be able to get resources in the financial markets as well. So, if the government borrows too heavily in the financial markets, then that is a problem. So I would instead actually, the other thing I would do is to recapitalize the banks so that the credit flows don't get choked. That matters. After all, somebody will have to pay in the future. Interest payments will pile up. Already from 2021, we are going to end up debt to GDP ratio of about 85%. So one needs to be careful. So it has to be calibrated. So that's how I would approach.
You spoke of doing something about bank credit because, yes, India is a bank-driven economy. But between recapitalizing the existing banks and a bad bank, which one would you favor and why?
No, no. I mean, I don't think it's an either or choice. Recapitalization has to be done because the NPAs will add up and so forth. Now, bad bank, at this stage, I don't think we need a bad bank really. If necessary, like for example, State Bank of India has its own asset reconstruction company. There is an ARC it has. So if it chooses to go that way, that's fine. But now we've got a proper bankruptcy process in place, and that is what we ought to use. I think that instrumentality ought to be used far more effectively than we have done that. The reason I also feel that when we talk about bad bank, our ministries are not able to move fast enough. Just remember how long it took, and still I'm not sure where it stands. The infrastructure investment fund that had been sort of promised in 2015 or 2016, it never took off. So it takes a long time, and also, but there was a time I would have said we should do it. When the bankruptcy process was not at work. But now, the IBC process is at work. I would strengthen that if necessary, and rely on the banks themselves to go to the ARCs if necessary.
Since resources are always going to be a constraint for a government in an economy which is only very slowly recovering, would you favor unconventional measures like, say, monetizing the deficit? What about issuance of COVID bonds? Would these be, avenues that the government could explore, that the finance minister could explore?
Well, on monetization, anyway, it is the RBI's decision. If it wants to monetize, it can go in and soak up some of the, buy the government securities in the market and put money into the market. I mean, that's something, that in the conventional way, the way we used to do, where the government will write the securities directly to the central bank, and central bank will then give equivalent amount of money, is no longer really needed, and it's not desirable either, because the other process which accomplishes the exactly same objective, which is the purchase of the securities in the secondary market, is far more transparent. It takes place at a market interest rate and so forth. Whereas, when you do it a direct transaction, you don't know what the appropriate interest rate is.
One of the demands which periodically kind of resurfaces is that since India has now such huge forex reserves, which are really earning very little, why not use these forex reserves to fund infrastructure? These will create jobs, it will create vital infrastructure. Is that a good use of forex reserves?
Well, at the end of the day, look, this ultimately comes down to asking whether the government is willing to run larger deficits, whether it is desirable for the government to run larger fiscal deficits. We had an earlier play of it during UPA 1, if I recall, about this. And I wrote about this. And in the end, my conclusion analytically was that there is no easy way to do this without also showing this onto the books of the government, meaning that it will have to ultimately reflect somehow in terms of the fiscal deficit, because the spending ultimately has to be done by the government. And you have talked about transparency and so forth, so even if you create some sort of a special vehicle, a special purpose vehicle, and put it on those books, it still ultimately is a part of the government liability, which certainly will show up in terms of the interest payments that will have to be paid by the government. So I don't think there's a way around that. Also, I think, that is up to the central government, and if the interest earned on these assets is very low, which I'm sure it is, because most of it sits in treasury bills in the United States. But that is an issue about, then should we have a sovereign wealth fund or something which then is invested in more lucrative, higher return securities, or even, equities and so forth. That's a bigger decision. So I would separate the two decisions, at the end of the day. By the way, I missed your question on transparency. To me, the main issue is that, whatever is also on the accounts of of any of the public entities, which are not integral part of the budget, that we should list fully. It doesn't matter whether you look, financial markets or ratings agencies are not stupid agencies. They know. So when we, keep harping at this lack of transparency, I don't think that's the issue. The ratings agencies do know. what the, what is on the books and what is off the books. But I think it'll be nice for the analysts to be able to get that in one single place. So we should start that practice. I think some of it got done actually in the previous budget. We ought to do a bit more of that, bring in all the expenditures so that even the government will find it useful actually to have all these listed somewhere in the budget itself.